Hey guys, welcome back. It's time for another installment in my Kellerman vlog. Hopefully you're familiar with it, but if not, I'll give you a brief rundown. I reread the murder mysteries by author Jonathan Kellerman. It's something I do as relaxation and de-stressing, and I reread the same book, start to finish. Then if there's a new book, and then start over at the beginning and go over again. And like a lot of people who reread and rewatch and, invest themselves in certain things, I have strong feelings, certain characters I like, certain ones I don't, certain questions I have, certain bones to pick I have, certain things I'd want to ask the author. And I want to discuss those things with other people who care about these books. So that's what these vlogs are for. Next up is The Clinic, which is one of my favorite books. Again, this is designed for people who have read these books. But just in case you haven't, I'll give you a brief synopsis. So there's a professor named Hope Devane, and she has written the book describes it as a male-bashing pop psych bestseller. It's, I think it's called Wolves and Sheep, Why Men Abuse Women. And it becomes a bestseller. It's a, huge money-making book, and she's on all the talk shows, and she's very popular with women, and some men are cool with it, and some men are not, And she's murdered. And we have to figure it out, just like any murder mystery. Who murdered her and why? Or perhaps why and then who. So, let's get into my notes. I think if I were naming... Oh, first of all, this is definitely a spoiler alert. There's going to be some spoilers for sure. I think if I were naming my top 10 Kellerman books, this would for sure be on it. Probably top 5. I really would have to do some thinking before I decided what the top 5 were, but this is a strong contender for top 5 and definitely top 10. Even though there are a lot of reused devices here and definitely some plot leaps and holes, I really, really like this book. I think the main reason is how much I like the characters. I like all the characters in this book pretty much. I even like the villains in the book. I think writing relatable characters is Kellerman's biggest strength. I'd be hard-pressed to find a character in this book I don't like or relate to on some level, even the alleged murderers and rapists. And then I thought about it, because this is all stuff I'm making notes on, and maybe not Casey. I don't think I like Casey. I think he's just a twat. But everybody else, and there's plenty of people in this book we're not supposed to like, but the only one that we're not supposed to like that I don't like is Casey. Okay, so here are the notes. So this is... when Milo is assigned cases. Later in the books, he gets to pick his cases, but at this point in his career, he's assigned cases. And he was assigned this case because Hope might be a lesbian because her popular book is critical of men. And I think that's the thinnest reason of all time for why he would be assigned a case, both in terms of, that happens in real life and it's thin, and it seems thin writing-wise. Okay. Nate and Al gets a mention in this book, and I believe this is not the first time Nate and Al has been mentioned. I'm always happy when I can identify real-life landmarks. I prefer that to fictional ones, and I hope to visit them all someday. Lowry's on La Cienega gets a shout-out. Both of these are LA restaurants I've heard of but haven't been to, and I'm going to start compiling a list so that I can visit. Okay, and then looking at my notes, they mention yet a third real LA restaurant. They mention Ben Frank's. And then speaking of which, what's a hickory burger? Alex goes just somewhere. It's not even a plot thing. It's just very, very incidental. I was hungry, so I had a hickory burger. And if I Google it, Sonic has a burger with hickory barbecue sauce, and I think Hardee's. And then there's definitely some places in LA that have burgers with hickory barbecue sauce on it. But specifically that name, is it something else, or is that all it is? Okay, so here's a commonly used plot device alert. Alex travels to a small town. In my notes, I wrote down, so I need to fix that. Alex travels to a small town in a remote part of California and encounters local law enforcement, who are sometimes helpful, sometimes not, and an elderly woman, usually a teacher, who can tell you everything about the victim's childhood. This is something that gets used in so many of these books, where it's where they finally start to figure it out. They crack the case because Alex traveled to the middle of nowhere. Sometimes the law enforcement there was helpful, sometimes they weren't, but then he found the old woman, and the old woman had all the secrets, usually because she taught the victim or the murderer, or both. And this gets used in so many books, and I know I made a note about this in a different book. I didn't put this in my notes here, but I'm going to say it anyways. Where if I was Alex, I just have a checklist for every case. Find the victim's hometown. Find the murderer's hometown. Go there, talk to law enforcement, find the teacher and or the oldest woman, and then you'll know all the secrets. Case solved. So, Silent Partner, I think, is the first example where this happens, where Alex goes to find Sharon Ransom's adoptive parents and the teacher. I'm blanking on her name. She's got like a name like Harshbarger or something like that. I'm blanking on the name. But or technically you could even count blood test, although Ezra Mayman is a man, not a woman, but it's the same concept. You go to the remote town and you find someone who's old and knows things. And then in a future book, there's Mavis something, Wanda Haltzer. There's any number of examples. Lydecker, that's the name, Lydecker. And you guys don't care about this, but I got there because when I was a young adult, I don't think I was a kid, there was a show that came on starring Jessica Alba called Dark Angel, and the villain was Lydecker, I believe. And so I always make that connection. The show was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. I liked it at the time. It was good for that time. Okay? Anyhow, I'm going to need to make a note of that plot device because it happens a lot. This, I think, is probably the most memorable one. This is the one where I really... a huge chunk of what's necessary to know for this book comes from the teacher. And so if he was going to only use this plot device once, this would be the time. Okay. Is Higginsville a real place? That was her, her hometown, which was meant to be like a tiny agricultural town. I looked on a map. I couldn't find it, but I found Ford City, which was supposed to be nearby. Okay. Who does Dr. Kruvik actually operate on? We know he does work at the women's clinic. Does he actually do any fertility work? We also know that very little was found at what was supposed to be his office. But we know that being a doctor is very important to him. So presumably he's operating on more than his one important patient, which I guess I shouldn't give away. Although, again, I'm assuming most of you have read the book. And I'm assuming he does plenty of operation at the women's clinic. So maybe that's where he gets his altruistic, I'm a doctor, I want to help, I want to heal thing, fed. Okay. Who or what was Brooke Hastings? Where does the name come from? We know that Big Mickey gave that name to several of his companies and shell corporations. And also the way the book phrases it is very interesting. It says he gave the name to his second wife. So that implies that that wasn't her birth name, that he had her change her name to that. So then if that wasn't her birth name and all the companies and things were named after her, then where did the name come from? So that's a huge question that I have. Maybe it's explained in the book and I just didn't get it. Okay. So I do not come from a rural area, but I have spent plenty of time. I live in more of an urban area in Wisconsin. There are plenty of rural areas in Wisconsin not far away. So when Kellerman describes the country fair as the smell of corn dogs and horse dung, it took me right back to some childhood memories. I would add funnel cake, like the smell of funnel cake and eating it, the smell of hay and grass, and maybe the oil, petroleum, diesel smells of carnival rides. Speaking of which, I really miss carnival rides the way they used to be, with just the old, inefficient engines and all the weird fluorescent tubes with covers on them, and I haven't seen that kind of stuff since I was a kid. Okay, the defense lawyer wants to co-opt Alex, and this happens a lot in the books, and I always feel like it's too cute. Hey, we need an excuse for Alex to talk to the suspect so that everything can be revealed and the readers will know everything that happened. But what plot device are we going to use to get there? Oh, the defense is going to see that there's a psychologist working with the police and co-opt them. And it'll be for their benefit, and it happens, yeah. I'm tired of that plot device. Okay. I mix up Hope Devane, Claire Argent, and Dr. Grace Blades. They're all very similar characters. And that's not a criticism. I like all of those characters, and they are all definitively different. I just tend to mix them up. I think Hope is my favorite, or at least this book is my favorite. But I like them all. He does a good job of writing that type of character. Okay. I really like Little Mickey, and I hope he gets to practice medicine again. I know that maybe I'm not supposed to feel that way. Maybe I'm supposed to feel like justice needs to be served, and I'm supposed to be angry. But I really do feel like he was trying to do the right thing and help the right people. And as the book talks about, and I alluded to earlier, practicing medicine is very important to him. And apparently he's not terrible at it, so I feel like he should be able to do so, and I hope that he's able to again. Okay. Even if everything he's accused of is true, part of me really likes Reed as well, and I wish he would have gotten the Embassy Row part. Yeah, there's some stuff that's left up to ambiguity, I feel like, as to Reed's guilt of certain things he's definitely guilty of, and not necessarily others. But he's definitely a pretty bad person in a lot of ways. But I still have some empathy for him, and I do think that things would have been a lot better if he would have gotten the part. So, again, that's all I can really say about that without going into too much detail and too many spoilers. If you have read the book, let me know how you feel. And again, this is kind of getting back to what I said at the beginning, where even the villains of the book I like. So I even like Big Mickey. Up until he drops the N-word, he seems very tolerant and charitable. You know, you lose a lot of points with me using racial slurs, but yeah, I mean, he did a lot for Hope and for Little Mickey and for Lottie and a lot of the ancillary characters in the book, and it appeared to be out of a certain code of honor. So, speaking of guilt and innocence, I know we're supposed to assume Reed is guilty of the charges brought before the committee, and Storm is not. I don't feel like we ever truly get clarity on that, and that's often the case in real-life rape cases. But we're pretty much supposed to assume that Reed is guilty and Storm is not. What about Huang? There's really nothing but ambiguity there. Okay, last question. Is this the first book where Milo asks Alex to help, not because he's a child psychologist or because he's a psychologist in general, but because Milo has learned that Alex has a crime-solving mind, for lack of a better way to put it? I'll have to go back and look at the previous books and see, but normally it's always like, hey, there's a child involved in this case, you know, can you do your therapy stuff? Or it's like Alex has a case, and then part of it turns criminal, and he turns to Milo. So it didn't develop until later in the series that Milo would just call Alex like, hey, I got a weird crime and I need a second opinion from somebody smart. And this might have been the first book where that happened. I think there's definitely some element of she was a psychologist, you're a psychologist, but it was less about that and more about you're smart. Okay, so let's see what book is next in the series. Survival of the Fittest. Yeah, this is a good era of Kellerman books. I like a lot of these books. I'm looking forward to giving you notes on Survival of the Fittest. So I hope that you will stick around and continue to hang out for these. And I'll see you on the next book.